Hey, podcast listeners, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And in episode 68 of the Pixar Post podcast, we're going to chat all about the latest Onward and Toy Story 4 news. We're going to chat about Pixar's 7 upcoming films in production. We ask if Pixar is looking to develop projects outside the United States again, and dive into Pixar's talks that they're going to have at upcoming conferences. Disney Plus news. We're going to talk about award season, but wait, there's more. We're also sharing our interview with Pixarian Cynthia Slavens, who's the director of studio mastering and operations. We're going to chat all about Pixar's move to remaster films in 4K, and the best part that you're going to learn while listening is that Pixar goes back to the original source frames and upgrades from there. They don't just stuff pixels and do light upgrades. They're really going in, and you guys are really going to love this.
Yes,
right?
I know. I mean, honestly, I think you could have talked to her for like hours.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's total geekery stuff, and I was all over it. So, but before we dive into all of that, we have Pixar trivia. And are you ready?
Oh, no.
Did you forget?
No, I did not forget, but I'm not prepared.
All right. Remember to leave some time for the folks listening along to guess along. So feel free to shout at your windshield or into your mind if you're listening along. So the first question is, what % of monsters in Monsters Incorporated had the same tongue in their character rig as Mike Wazowski's tongue?
What kind of question is this?
Hang on. 15%, 50%, or 90%?
This is unbelievable.
All right.
This isn't like a typical trivia question.
Why not?
I'm going 90.
You are darn right. And it's because it was a fun fact from the Turin Science Behind Pixar exhibit.
Oh, the one that we stayed like 7.5 hours in?
Yes.
It might have been longer.
It might have. But yeah, good guess. Why did you go that way?
I just thought of the rig, and I just figured, because it was Monsters, Inc., right?
Right.
And I figured they would have used the same kind of rig for most of the monsters to save money and time.
Well, there you go. Excellent guess.
Thank you.
Educated guess.
Yes, educated.
Yes. All right.
But a guess nonetheless.
Yeah. Ooh, a guess nonetheless. Your next trivia question is...
It's going to be something crazy like the first one.
You're darn right it is. During the production of Up, the average animator produced how much animation in a week? 4 seconds of animation, 27 seconds of animation, or 61 seconds of animation? How much do they produce in an average week?
I feel like I remember this, and I feel like it was really low.
4 seconds, 27 seconds, or 61 seconds?
It's the middle one.
You think 27?
Yes.
That is incorrect.
Oh no, is it 61?
That is incorrect.
It really is, because that was my first choice was going to be the 6 or the 4 seconds.
I was like, there wasn't a 6. But yeah, 4 seconds. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
I know, in a whole week. I mean, but that
was my first inclination too. Darn it, I should have.
Also from the Science Behind Pixar exhibit.
Yeah.
Now in Denver. Denver, Colorado. All right. So, yeah. Well, good job.
Oh,
I mean, those were not easy questions.
Yeah, no, those were good.
So what do you say
I knew that second one too. Oh, man.
Could have been 2 for 2.
That's okay.
That's all right. So what do you say we dive into some news?
Yes, there's so much.
Yeah, let's get to the juicy stuff first. So the first thing here is that Mark Nielsen, the producer of Toy Story 4, was interviewed by Digital Spy, and this is like for the in-home release of Toy Story 4. So he said, his quote was, "There are, 7 other feature films in production at Pixar that are all lined up that are really exciting that we have crews working on, or that have crews working on them. So, Onward and Soul are 2 of those 7, so that leaves 5 more. Now, there are confirmed that Domi Shi is working on an original, so that leaves 4 more. It was said before that Brian Fee was working on an original, like John Morris, the president of Pixar Animation Studio. Jim Morris. John Morris, the voice of Andy from Toy Story.
Yeah.
Isn't that who that is?
I can't remember.
Yeah. But so yeah, he had said that Brian Fee was working on original a couple different times. So if that's the case, that leaves 3 unknown. So what I wanted to do was dive into first Mark Andrews.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. So it's been said that he's been working on a sci-fi type film after he wrapped Brave. I ran into him at the studio at the Incredibles 2 event, and I said, oh, I'm not trying to get anything out of you, but we're just excited for your upcoming film. And he's like, oh, it's coming. So I think we've brought that up on here before. But then we were totally confused because he's been posting pictures of him like working out in his like personal gym, going on planes, pitching projects.
Right. And he wasn't listed as a member of the Pixar Brain Trust on the Toy Story 4 credits.
The senior creative team?
Yeah, the senior creative team. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
Which perplexed us.
Yeah. But then there was this whole, to muddy the waters even more, there was a Pixar in Concert event on September 19th with Michael Giacchino, and Mark was there. Mark Andrews was there. Our friend Josh was there, reported back to us, and said, well, I'm like, did they give any indication that he was not at Pixar? They're like, no, they introduced him as like Pixar director Mark Andrews, which I guess even if he's not there is still a true title.
Right.
But he just said it was weird that they didn't make any mention of it. And then he said it was also weird too, because Brave was not included in the Pixar in Concert like that they did, like the layout that they did for it, for the music for that night. So it just seemed all kind of back and forth.
I know.
So then we started looking at like his LinkedIn page. I know we totally like internet stalked, but we looked at his LinkedIn page, and then it has like other studios that he's at, but it still says he's active at Pixar too. So it's like, what's going on here? It says he's pitching projects. So yeah, we're going to have to find out if he's still there, because he has Mythos Studios and Juniper, what the heck is it here? Juniper Road Films, which are involved in there on his LinkedIn page that he says he's working on. So my initial thought is, and I could be way off base, you tell me what you think. I think that it's kind of like a Brad Bird scenario potentially for him right now, where he kind of is coming and going. Maybe the film got off track a little bit and he needed to step away from Pixar for a little bit, do something else, and then he can come back.
You're right. Yeah.
That's just a guess.
Could be. It's a good guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to... I think that seeing him off the senior creative team really threw me off. It's like, did he leave?
Or was he just not there long enough that he didn't qualify to be on?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the rules to be on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
It listed so many new people.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So that's one that's potentially up in the air. So is the next one potentially Brad Bird? I'll just go right to the end here, and then we'll work backwards. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either.
First off, it would be very quick after, I guess 17, he does films pretty quick when he can get going on them. Incredibles 2 was moved up an entire year to swap places with Toy Story 4. So you never know. But, this whole thing kind of started, back in, November 22nd, 2018. There's a Deadline podcast called Crew Call. He was interviewed on that podcast, and they asked what he was working on. And Brad said, well, I've been trying for years to crack coming up with a screenplay for this book, 1906, which is based on a giant earthquake that happened a massive earthquake in San Francisco. And then it also involves like corporate greed and all these other things that are in there. It's based on real events, but then completely fictionalized from there. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we hear that. We immediately get the 1906 book.
Oh, yeah. I think you started reading it that night.
Yes.
You downloaded it to your Kindle.
I did. And what was interesting, though, is that in the biography section about the author, who's James Del Sandros, he's Del Sandro. He says that he is, in quotes, he is the screenwriter of the upcoming Pixar/Warner Brothers live-action film 1906, based on this novel. So I was like, what am I looking at here?
Right.
Like, that really threw me off here. So could it be classified as a Pixar film? Would they be working in conjunction with another studio? Who is this James guy to say this and throw us all off?
I know. Well, did you say musical yet?
No. So the musical comes in at another spot. So in January of 2019, he's interviewed by Variety on a red carpet, and he says, quote, well, it's a musical, actually, when they ask him what he's working on next. I don't know anything about musicals, so I figure I should do this because I'm deathly afraid of it, and it seems like a cool thing. It's a project that I've been wanting to make for a long time. It's got 20 minutes of animation in it. It's an original project, and he later goes on to say that Michael Giacchino would be composing and scoring the music for it.
So could it be because they do work on the Warner Brothers soundstage, the music? Could that person who say, he's working with Pixar and Warner Brothers, could it have just been like, oh, I know you were on the soundstage of it? It just came into my mind.
But how do you make out like the whole? So okay,
yeah, the 20 minutes.
So let's separate a couple different things here. Okay. So first off, the 1906 project. I actually don't think that has anything to do. So you can almost like take Warner Brothers out of it.
Right.
I thought that originally.
Okay.
In looking at it again, I feel like, and again, I could be way off, but I feel like you can take out the Warner Brothers Pixar thing. I feel like James, the author, had written that, or somebody wrote that, and it was like
in error.
Yeah, maybe not the case. But the only thing that we have heard at this point is because at the View conference, which is going on currently, it's October 21st through the 25th, Brad Bird is a keynote speaker at that, and his biography on that website says he is currently writing a live-action musical, all right, that tracks with what he said in January, for Sony Pictures, which is fine because he never said who it was with, which will include 20 minutes of animation, he said that, and feature music by Michael Giacchino, he said that. So the question is, the 20 minutes of animation, will it be involving Pixar because of his connection to Pixar? Will it be 20 minutes of hand-drawn animation because of how much he loves that art form and did it with the Iron Giant?
Mm-hmm. And the Brave Little Toaster, right?
Mm-mm.
Oh. Did he work with the Brave Little Toaster?
That was John Lasseter.
Oh, that's what
So the question is like, is Pixar going to be involved in this? And what is this project? It's not, we're assuming not 1906. So what do we think?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Had to get Luxo off the board so she didn't stop recording us.
Who's our cat?
Yeah, who's our cat?
She decided to walk over it. It's like the ending of Inside Out here during the credits.
I know. She's
beep,
like...
boop, boop, beep, beep.
She's like making cameos just like our live streams.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I heard about it, I mean, when you think about animation on top of live action, you think two films, at least I do.
Okay, let's see if it's the same one.
First and foremost, I think of...
Mary Poppins.
No, I think of Roger
Who Framed
Rabbit.
Roger Rabbit? Yes, those are the two I think of.
Second is Mary Poppins.
Yeah, those are the two I
always
think of.
Roger Rabbit first, and then Mary Poppins.
That's funny, because I think of Who Framed Roger Rabbit first, too, but I thought you were going to say it, so that's why I said it backwards.
But then there's a third, because I loved this movie as a kid, but I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Okay, I'm listening. What is it?
It's a Disney movie.
Bedknobs and Broomsticks?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever have seen it.
Okay.
But I know it was a hybrid film.
Oh, man, I loved that movie. It probably... we can watch it on November 12th.
That's right, Disney Plus. Ooh, what's going to be the inaugural thing we're going to watch?
I don't know.
One of the originals?
I don't know. We're getting off topic, but I can't wait.
I know. That's going to be super exciting.
It's like 2.5 weeks away.
So, you're right. But, okay, so with Brad Bird, though, the thing that gets me thinking, too, and I think this might be where you're... Well, maybe not, but the 20 minutes of animation, is that exclusive to the beginning? Is that in the middle? Is it the end? Or is it a blend, literally like Mary Poppins or whatever, where they're interacting together?
Oh.
Because it could just be like an opening sequence in animation.
It could be. It could be. Or they go through, I don't know, like Stranger Things. They go through a portal and then it's like
it
the
becomes
upside down,
animation.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like the animation part, and then they come out, and everything's fine.
So I'm going to go out
Like
on
Enchanted.
Ooh, right. Yes, Enchanted does that. Like when she comes from her world
Yeah,
into
that's kind of another hybrid.
Okay. That's probably...
Because there's more than I thought.
Oh, there's a bunch. Yeah. I've been cataloging Disney Plus movies. It's like over 700 that I've written out. And yeah, there's a lot because I'm putting in categories as far as, are they hybrid with live action and animation? Are they just animation? There's another one like The Friendly Dragon.
Pete the Magic. Yeah, Pete's Dragon.
Well, Pete's Dragon, but there's another one. I'm forgetting what it is now,
Yeah.
but it was before that. So anyways.
That's interesting.
So then
who else? Who else do we think could be some of these films?
Well, so we've got a whole bunch of folks that it could be. We've got Pete Sohn, who is off of The Good Dinosaur. We've got Bob Peterson. Now, he's doing Forky Asks a Question, but those are shorts. There's like 10 of them.
Yeah, I was going to say
they're brief.
Yeah, not only are they like 2 minutes.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be a long, drawn-out series. Like you said, it's going to be like 10. It's going to be like those Disney Junior shows.
Yeah.
That kind of
in-between.
Yeah, it's like really quick, and they never do a second season of them.
Right.
It's like Nina Needs to Go.
Yeah.
That's like the first thing I think of.
So who else? Do you have anybody else in mind?
Steve Purcell.
Yes. Okay, he would be in the running.
Kristen. Is it Kristen or Kirsten? It's Kristen Lester, right?
Kristen Lester. Yeah.
And who is the...
Rosanna Sullivan, and then Brian Larson, who has now done Smash and Grab as well as The Legend of Mordu.
Right.
So he's a seasoned short director.
But who is the girl storyboard artist that you are always talk about?
I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
You're always
right
like,
now,
she's going to
but
direct.
I don't think she's there yet.
I know, but
I don't think she's there yet. Oh my gosh, why is this driving me nuts?
I know, well, you talk about her all the time.
Yeah, and that's not cool that I can't remember it right now.
I know, it's because I put you on the spot.
That's correct. I mean, but I'm also just thinking of Carrie Hobson just because of the fact that I just talked to her for Toy Story 4 event when we were there.
Okay.
But this is, I almost had it. It was one of those things where you can like see the name flash in front of
Adrian Molina.
Adrian Molina, yes. I think that's a good one to look towards now. He kind of definitely earned his stripes working with Leon Coco, with Leon Courage on Coco. Ronnie Del Carmen, who was involved with Pete Docter on Up and Inside Out.
Right. Gosh, I feel like there's so many names.
There's a ton of potential. The other thing to think, Louise Smythe.
Yes. Yes.
Again,
love her.
She hasn't expressed interest, at least that I'm aware of.
No, you don't. This is totally going off like conversations that you and I have had that you always tell me. You're like, oh man, she could direct with like how
I believe she can.
How she does like the storyboarding.
Yeah,
and
I think
everything.
she totally could.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of names. There's a lot of potential. They are continuing to push diversity. So we don't know what other, cultures, what other, women might be involved in the directing chair. Obviously Domi Shi is a huge one there. But there's just so many options. You got Bobby Rubio coming right off of Float, Edwin Chang for Wind, and then I'm forgetting Loop. Oh man, Megan. But yeah, there's just so many options that are out there right now. It's almost like, how do you determine who these last two couple films are going to be? I can't wait to find out more.
I know. And they're through 2024?
Well, that was
allegedly.
Well, that was our projections.
Oh, okay.
So we know through 2022 has been confirmed by Disney.
Oh, just given the dates. Got it.
Given the pattern that they have been doing, it would be June of 2023. And then if they're going to continue to do this,
the one film, 2.
Exactly. One film 1 year, 2 films the next year, then it would be in early March of 2024.
Yeah.
I wrote it in the post as just 2024, projected or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to keep doing the 1, 2, 1, 2. I have a feeling
I think they will.
Yeah.
That's just my thought, though.
I love it, but it's just...
Sure. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Plus, they have to then compete against their own studio when it comes time for award season and everything.
Is Disney doing like a 1-2, 1-2?
I don't think they are right now.
Yeah.
Because we don't know too much of what's going on with past.
Right.
They've got quite a few though that they announced at D23. But we'll see after Frozen 2, which direction they go. So what do you think? Did we chat about that?
I think we got enough.
Yeah, it's so exciting though. I love this speculation and conjecture stuff where you can dive in and try to come up with all these different ideas of who's going to be doing what.
I know you do.
What, you don't?
I do. You were like really into it. You're like, oh my gosh, it could be this person. It could be this person. I'm like, well, yeah, it could be.
You're just humoring me.
It could be 100 people there.
Nod along. So
smile and nod.
Yeah. So I mentioned Brad Bird being at the View conference in Turin, Italy. He's doing a couple different sessions there. So the animator as an actor, setting the table, the art of the movie opening, which he's always great at the first act of a film. If any of those happen to pop up online or additional information is available, we'll be sure to share it. Those 2 sessions have already happened. And then Ralph Eggleston is there as well. He's doing the Parr home renovations, so about Incredibles 2. And then on Friday, he's doing character in world building, which is on October 25th. Dylan Sisson is there. He's doing technical Toy Story, the latest and greatest Pixar's Render Man, which you'll hear of him again in a minute. And then Bill Reeves is there talking about the evolution of the Toy Story world, which I have a feeling is the same presentation that we heard when we were there for the Toy Story event.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, and then just as far as other general information, SIGGRAPH Asia is going to be held this year in Brisbane, Australia, November 17th through the 20th. And there's going to be a couple different sessions. So one is multi-threading in Pixar's animation tools. George Elcora, a software engineer, and Florian Zitzelberger, I guess we'll go with that one for now, as lead software engineer. And again, I can get away with not pronouncing last names because nobody can pronounce mine either, but that's cool. Ours, I should say. So in that particular session, they're going to talk to audience members about the practical techniques of applying multi-threading to achieve interactivity and high performance for professional-grade animation tools. We discussed the philosophy behind the design of Presto, Pixar's proprietary animation tool, and how its design lends itself to take advantage of increasing number of cores found in today's desktops and servers, which was an article I read today about the complexities. So they're going to have to change how they write the code for Presto based on the number of cores and threads that processors in computers can handle.
What?
Because it's actually an article.
I understand. I only understand this because you talked technical to me so much. So over time, I have understood this. I mean, it's like, fun fact, when TJ and I first started dating in the 90s, I would sit with him while he learned HTML.
She helped me.
And I helped you, and now
you held the book for me.
I learned HTML.
You would reference and look up HTML, and the only reason I learned HTML is because in the early days of eBay, because that was like, you could not. If you didn't do HTML, it was just like one long sentence. Yeah. And if I was going to sell something, it was driving me nuts. Plus, I had done an internship, and the guy that was doing like their web programming left, and he's like, "Well, we use Cold Fusion," and I'm like, "What?" And so then it turned out like he's like, you need to learn HTML and then this and that. So it just became a thing. Yeah.
So all this technical stuff.
And then after that, I went and worked at CompUSA.
Never ended.
No,
I always listen, and I like I said, like we just kind of giggled about it. Sometimes just smile and nod. Yeah. But I mean, I do pick up a lot of it. So it's interesting that for 20 years, you have been interested in it.
Oh,
you have stayed strong.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, the other day, kind of leaning into this same thing, when I was at CompUSA, which is a retail computer store.
It was.
I had bought, at that time, Pixar stock. I had bought Pixar and Apple stock. And again, our cat is climbing on chairs behind us. But I had bought it, and I just found my original order of that stock that I just told you the other day. Or yesterday, in fact.
Yeah, we were just talking about it.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I had like the printout this is the first time that I bought Pixar stock.
I know. It still sometimes bums me out, though, when you talk about it, because you never ordered the stock sheet.
Ugh, the stock certificate.
The stock certificate.
Yeah, you had to order it. It's not like the old days where you would always get it. You had to order it.
You had to order it
and I didn't order it.
Before
now, when
it changed hands, before it was basically went to Disney.
Exactly. And we talked about this with Jeff Kays, actually, who runs thisdayinpixar.com. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, he has his. But when Disney absorbed and bought Pixar, they sent out a mailer asking for those certificates back.
Oh, really?
And you had to say, "Oh, I lost it," if you didn't have it.
Oh.
So I would have had to have. I would have totally lied. Yeah. I wouldn't have given that thing up.
I know.
But I so regret that I never got one. And I've looked on eBay since to go buy one, and they're like hundreds of dollars, and it has somebody else's name printed on it.
Yeah, I know. And you know what? That's like, gosh, that's like the one thing that like hurts my soul for you, because I know
it would have been so cool.
I know. That's like, gosh, and you bought it so long ago.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, that's like the one thing. I remember how bummed you were when you're like, really.
Why didn't I do this?
Yes.
Yeah. I know.
Sorry to get off track, but
isn't it funny how long Pixar has been like a part of our lives, even before we were doing anything regarding the website?
Well, even before, I mean, so you and I we've been together since 1999.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously Pixar was like
95 was their first official theatrical release. Yeah, they existed before that, but
I mean, we knew of Pixar because we we saw the Jiggling Lifesaver commercials and stuff like that, but we did not know it was Pixar.
No, not at the time.
Or the Tropicana.
Oh, then that Tropicana commercial with the straw smashing into the orange.
Mm-hmm. Or the gingivitis fighting in the boxing ring. Or Listerine.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been around us so much. I mean, even before we started the website, I was outside the gates trying to convince the security guard to let me in when I was there for a business trip in California, trying everything. It's just crazy how much it has been around and how much it just centered on that versus like Pixar versus like animation in general we loved, but it was just, there's always been something about it. And I wish we could go to all of these SIGGRAPH sessions. Look at this loop back here.
I know you would. Ooh,
yeah.
I might be sitting there just a little.
Well, for SIGGRAPH, it's so technical.
So technical.
And in fact, Jeff and I have talked about it, a couple other people too. It's kind of funny. We've been like, we would love to go, but a lot of it would fly over our heads. But it would still be cool just to be there, absorb it, and learn even more from it.
Yeah, for me, I'm like, okay, let's do the theme parks and consumer products. That's like what fascinates me.
Well, sure.
And the story department.
We like it all.
We do. We really, really do.
So I mentioned at the view.
I feel like every time we talk to someone, it's like, oh.
Yeah, I like that too.
I like that too.
Yeah. I mentioned that Dylan Sisson, who's the marketing manager at one of the marketing managers for RenderMan, was at the View conference. He's doing that exact same session, the technical Toy Story, the latest and greatest in Pixar's RenderMan. So he's doing that session each day, and it showcases Pixar's core technologies that help make Toy Story 4 possible. RenderMan and Universal's scene description. During production breakdowns and demos, you'll see the latest RenderMan workflows for lighting and look development, featuring powerful interactive workflows for artists. So the thing that's cool there is just, that's essentially a sales pitch presentation for them. Mm-hmm. Keep using RenderMan, keep doing what you're doing. The session that is really kind of exciting, because it's so new, is the Making of Onward session.
Ooh.
So this is Tuesday, November 19th. So coming up in like a month, we're going to hopefully get some news. SIGGRAPH usually posts some videos. Hopefully we can get a video that shows a couple new things from Onward.
So if that is taking place on November 19th,
correct.
Possibly that's the reason why, I guess I could say it.
Yeah.
That we're going out for the Onward press day.
Oh, so that way they already have footage done?
Well, yeah, not only that, but because, they're going to be talking about it. So maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's pretty exciting. So it says there's not, well, actually, I was going to read the description, but they kept that one pretty quiet. So it basically just says it's with Renee Tam, Lightspeed lead at Pixar Animation Studios, takes you through the making of Onward. So that's about all we know there. But I'm excited to see what might come of it. There's also one other session, which is proactive large-scale pipeline efficiency management, which is going to be with a couple other studios involved in that one. But Renee is speaking at that one too, where audiences are said to learn perspectives on balancing the creation of amazing visuals in tight production timeframes. So there's going to be a couple others from Animal Logic, Disney, Frame Store, and Industrial Light and Magic along there with Renee Tam from Pixar. So pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yep. Okay. So then the other thing that got our attention was this. I'm starting to I read into it, possibly too much.
You read into something?
Wait, I overanalyzed it? Hey.
It's like, did you go to the grocery store? Talk about overanalyzing.
It sure is a good thing that my title at work is an analyst.
Yes, it is.
So, so something else that popped up a few times that we wanted to explore a little bit more. Again, not saying that this is the case, but the first thing came up with a group of journalists that, well, I guess there's journalists and business leaders from 2 different countries. And so the first one is Disney India recently set up a session for a group of journalists to head out to Pixar and chat with the president, president of Pixar again, Jim Morris, and Republic World, and other websites. So Republic World is the website, and others had noted, quote, while the films already have a huge fan base in India, the animation studio president, Jim Morris, said he is planning to expand in the country. Talking about his plans of entering the Indian market, Jim Morris said that he is open to suggestions on how the company can flourish better in India. So what does that mean that he's planning to expand in the country?
So, yes, so I don't know if that means, you know, they're expanding to help with the Disney Plus programming, you know, due to maybe budgets, you know, maybe outsourcing animation and work to do the film, like the Disney Plus streaming like shows quicker.
It's,
you know,
very possible.
Kind of like just like the, you know, the Disney shows that are on the Disney Channel and stuff like that. That just kind of like get siphoned off real quick. They're made very quickly.
Well, they have to because they're coming out weekly.
Yeah.
And the production cycle.
Yeah,
and
production.
You can't put as much budget towards it either. And he goes on to say that in the article that there are differences. He said, you know, essentially, I think I'm going to bring this up later too, but, you know, he talks about the fact that they're a feature film production house and that's going to be their continued focus. You've got they're producing Forky Asks a Question and Lamp Life, but then you've got Monsters at Work, which is through Disney, Disney Toon, but then you now have, they aren't actually doing the animation. They are doing it through a French animation studio called Dwarf Studio. So,
and you know what? Sorry to interrupt you, but I also thought like, maybe they could be doing like an Indian inspired film or something.
Well, they certainly could, because if they could see the impact of how much like Coco had on Mexico and Latin countries in general, they could be saying, we could expand here. There could be really good opportunities for reaching that audience as well. And
we know, I believe Sanjay Patel is now at Netflix because he has his whole, you know, expansion of his book.
Correct. So don't worry, Gee Happy. He is doing a series there called just Gee Happy on Netflix, which is a children's animation series.
Yeah, and it reminds me of that UK show, Hey Duggo, that Leo sometimes watched. Doesn't the animation kind of look like it?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Especially with like the elephant trunk.
Yes.
Yeah.
How it's just like everything's very, you know, rounded.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. We're excited for Sanjay Patel, who did Sanjay's Super Team, going over there and doing that. But you're right. I mean,
it could be so many different things.
Yeah. We shall see. But then the other part of this that had me thinking too is Armenian Prime Minister, again, I'm going to have to pronounce this one, Nikol Pashinyan, also met with, in the article, it was funny, the article on the website, it was just news.am, mentioned they met with the senior VP of Pixar, and there was a picture. There was no caption or anything, but I knew from the picture it was Katherine Sarafian. Mm-hmm. And she was there leading up to an October 6th through the 9th. There was a World Congress of Information Technology in Yerevan in Armenia, where he noted Armenia is interested in cooperation with Pixar Animation Studios. I hope that you will find the opportunity to start some kind of activity in Armenia. So Pashinyan briefed guests on the process of creating good tax conditions for high-tech companies too. It just seems like that's two instances in almost a month period where you're hearing people saying, I want to work with Pixar, or Pixar is saying, I want to work more with your country. Mm-hmm. So I feel like there's something there.
Now that one you might be looking into too much.
Okay. Which, you mean both of them?
For Katherine.
Okay. Yeah, because it was
I don't know her background, but maybe she's Armenian and maybe she happened to be there and spoke with them or just was
she
doing
was booked
something
at the event.
Yeah, so she was booked at the event, and that's just them saying, we would love to work with you. That's not Pixar saying we would love to.
Correct. I know that's not, I'm saying where Pixar said it is with Jim Morris, where he was saying, I'd like to work to find a way with India, but it didn't say work with them.
I don't know.
But it just feels like with all these Disney Plus shows, there's got to be more production houses that are going to do this, because Jim Morris mentioned, I don't have the budget and the time to do these things because we are staying focused on feature films.
Their core focus.
Which is so literally this is taking bits and pieces from a bunch of things, and I'm trying to make a story out of it.
I know.
Like
this literally is like 15 stories, like 15 different like articles.
Yeah, I mean, but it just, you start to get whiffs of things and you're like, what is that smell?
Yeah, let's piece it all together.
Does that smell like something? Or, oh, no, it's not. Or, oh, yeah, it is. So we'll find out. Time will tell. If anything obviously ends up with Armenia or in India in production-wise for anything Disney Plus, then there might be something there. But the thing that gets me thinking about, too, is if that's the case, what about Pixar Canada?
Yeah, because Pixar Canada...
That was part of... They were going to do more of the shorty shorts, the Mater's Tall Tales. Yeah. They did Partysaurus Rex.
They did some tunes.
They did some parts of Small Fry.
Yep.
It's like, okay, so... what would that mean for that? Because Ed Catmull was like, he said it in his Creativity Inc. book, we made a mistake. We wanted to keep...
Would it not be Pixar? I don't know if they would brand it Pixar.
It definitely would not be.
Yeah.
At least I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think this would be an outsourced, like they're doing with Monsters at Work, where another studio that is geared and built for doing television shows will be able to do it.
To do it quickly rather than just call it a branch of Pixar.
Correct.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
That's the only reason I'm thinking all this stuff. Because because we heard that article.
It's a good discussion. It's a good.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Because we've got that article from Moto Expo, which was in September, which was the Pixar's biannual event.
Yes.
It used to be just an all-around car show. Now it's an all-electric car show, which is pretty neat that they changed it up. And they changed the names from Motorama to Moto Expo. But this year, the writer of that article mentioned that he heard as an afterthought that Cars was going to live on as a Disney Plus series, or that it was going to streaming.
Yeah. So that,
you can start to
just, I totally get, I know.
Because I'm hearing it I'm like, okay, where are they going to produce it? Then Jim Morris says, we can't really do that here. Then you've got articles at that same time of people being like, we could work with you.
We could do it, yeah.
And, we'd be interested in working with you, Pixar. So there's a little bit of courting going on. There's maybe.
Courting. I like that.
So, yeah, I'm going old school. But anyways, it doesn't mean it's anything. We've belabored that point, but I just wanted to at least bring it up because
it's interesting.
I got a whiff.
Yeah.
So Disney Plus, just a couple weeks away. We're super excited still. Be sure, stay tuned. We're going to be doing more. I already mentioned some of the cataloging that I'm doing and some things along those lines. We talked about, from my notes here, I'll mention the part. So this was from Outlook magazine, which again was another, it's outlookindia.com. And where Jim said we challenge. Oh, this is an interesting one.
Oh, no.
This is the storyline one that I'm like, what is happening here? So.
Oh, this is the one that the Pixar theory people are going to.
Oh, jump right all over.
Yes.
So Jim touched on something else when he was talking about Disney Plus. And he said, we challenged ourselves in terms of things like what we could do for Disney Plus that would be similar to the impact on streaming that Toy Story had on cinema. So first off, let that sink in, that he wants to try to do something that has an impact of changing,
like groundbreaking.
Yeah.
That's what I think of.
Right. So we're playing with different types of storytelling and things that could only be done in a number of different shows that have to thread together in some way. ... We actually have a project that we're doing on those lines. What the heck?
So you and I had two different opinions about this.
Yes.
I took it as how cool would it be when you thought of that Pixar pipeline project and how to interview someone, when we interviewed someone from each department of where the film is comes to fruition and which departments it goes through all the way to its theatrical release.
Right. So that's how you were saying that they would be interwoven.
That's how I think they could be interwoven. I think it would be cool to watch a series of shows.
Yeah.
Shane Dawson, Jeffree Star-esque, YouTube stuff, but documentary style.
Right.
Videos on how each department does a film and have it be one of these upcoming 7 films. And then up till the end of the release date.
Well,
that's what I want.
Well,
and I think that's why I thought that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be very cool. There's 2 parts. One is he says, I want to do something that's going to be similar to the impact that Toy Story had on cinema. That's just a documentary.
No, I think that's a big impact thing.
I don't know. But they're talking about playing with different types of storytelling, which I guess could play into, now that I'm saying it again, it could play into what you're talking about. But it says could be done in a number of different shows. To me, this feels like separate properties.
Yeah.
And these properties, so when I posted this, it was funny. The Pixar Times, our buddy Samad over there, he wrote back and he said, Pixar Cinematic Universe with a wink. So it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe where they all are interwoven. But so he did Pixar Cinematic. I'm not well, that's kind of what that sounds like.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I hope it is something that's a behind the scenes thing too.
Yeah, I really, really want a behind the scenes thing. But I just love that documentary-esque style.
But
stuff.
In my mind, I don't see how that could be impactful in such a way that
for me it would be impactful.
For our knowledge, for our entertainment. He's speaking to you.
Yes. This directly goes out to Pixar Post.
This one goes out to Pixar Post. It's roller skating in the 80s here.
Yeah. Gosh, that was the best roller skating.
Absolutely.
Sorry, not to diverge.
All right, everybody, shoot the duck.
Oh man.
We're gonna slow this one down for all the lovers in the house. All right. So award season. going from roller skating to award season. So we wrote up a post recently. So can Toy Story 4 win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature up against a record-setting 32 films? So this got a ton of conversation on our website. And
well, because that 32 will go down to like 5 or 6.
it'll go down to 5. Yeah, at least that's what they said. The Academy had
So the
written.
Academy goes to 5 and
That'll be the final that then gets voted on for the official. But so people were like, well, Toy Story 3 won, and that was a sequel. That was one of the common comments out there. And I said, well, yes. And I understand not everybody has time to read all the articles
yes.
that we're writing. So I'm not saying like, go read the article. But we said that is the case, but that's the only one
Yes.
that has ever won.
That's
The only sequel that has ever won an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. So now, granted, that category hasn't been around for decades and decades and decades, but it has been around for a couple decades. It started in 2001, or a decade. Mm-hmm. So it started in 2001. So that's been still quite a few years with no other sequels, and there's been plenty nominated. But we've also had a rash of other things other sequels that have been overlooked, which, I mean, don't even get me started on some of them.
I know.
You know, Monsters University not even getting a nod.
That still is one of my, you and I have talked about it so many times on our live streams, on our podcasts.
Yep.
How Monsters University, I mean, it's unfortunate that it came out when Frozen came out.
Right, but it still deserved a nomination.
Still deserved a nomination.
So we'll stand by that. Cars 2 was the first time that a Pixar film since it was created hadn't been nominated. That was surprising to us because of the quality of the film, at least visually, and some of the other films that were in the category. Again, not putting anything down for them, but it was just like, oh, okay. But that's okay. Finding Dory, and this is where somebody was like, but it made over, in the comments, Toy Story 4, they're like, it made over $1 billion. Well, so did Finding Dory, and that didn't even get a nomination.
No.
Which is crazy talk. All the technical advancements, the water, the way they animated Hank,
Yeah.
they, you know, without a musculoskeletal system, you know, I mean, it's like, come on. Cars 3 didn't get a nomination. So there's plenty of films that are sequels that don't even get nominated, only one that's won. And then you've got the largest film grouping that's ever happened with 32 films. So that's a big group. Again, what I want to stress, though, is it doesn't mean, because I wrote the question, can it win? It doesn't mean that it can't, but it's going to be interesting to see this year, too, because the films that are going to be in this category, so many of them are sequels. So you're increasing the odds that a sequel is going to win. You've got Frozen 2, Lego Movie 2, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, Angry Birds Movie 2, Secret Life of Pets 2. There's a ton
Of sequels.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. On the flip side of that, first off, do you think it'll get a nomination?
Yeah, I do.
I 100% think it will.
I do.
Partly because you've got...
The ending.
Yeah. Because it was bold. Because it did something different. And it seems to be a trend that is going to continue now. Whereas before, it was this whole thing where it's like, you're going to keep this franchise alive as long as you can and squeeze as much out of it as humanly possible. But now it's all about, like, how do you rip it up? How do you do something bold enough to catch people's attention to get them to go to the theater? Because Star Wars, we just watched the final trailer, and it's like, the saga will end. Like,
I know. And I talked to you about that. I was like, what do you mean it's over?
I know. We don't want it to be over.
No.
Much in the same way we don't want Toy Story 4 to be the ending.
Yeah.
Because I still want to see more of these
plea.
characters.
I could be the next Rey type character in the next 3 Star Wars. What is that going to be?
Okay, yeah.
What, 12, 13, 14?
All right, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
I could do it.
Yeah.
Just give me a name and I will be the next person. Like, yes, that saga ends, but the story will continue with me.
And that's strictly because you don't want it to end, and because when you watch Ray kicking some backside, you think it's so cool.
Yes, and you know what? I've always watched Star Wars with you. I know we're not talking about Pixar right now, but I've always watched Star Wars with you and stuff. But when that Force Awakens movie came,
that changed everything for you.
That changed it for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's
it modernized
such the coolest movie. Since then, we've watched Solo, we've watched the. Like all
Rogue One.
Like Rogue,
the
and I'm into them. Like I'm really into them now.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
but yeah.
But so Jonas Rivera was interviewed, and he said, the story of Woody is not over. We've still got more to tell. That doesn't mean they're doing a movie. He even alluded to it might continue on in a short, but
I think it will.
It should. It should.
Especially those tunes that they do.
But here you go again. Here's the problem. The problem becomes. You tore them apart. First off, everybody was like, you had a clean ending with the third.
Yeah.
Now you tore them apart. Now you're going to give me a short and all of a sudden, like, show them like video chatting or something. We talked about that in our review. Like, unless it's separated again and it's just about Woody, then it feels like, what are you guys doing again?
I don't know.
But again, we say that every time.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden it's like, you see it. Like we said with Toy Story 4, it's a film I didn't know I needed, but I wanted, but I liked it.
Yeah, you're right.
Didn't know I wanted, but I needed. Yeah.
It's like, get my verbiage right.
Yeah, whatever. So the flip side of this is short films. So likewise with the feature films, it was a record number of films. The short films were also a record number. There was 85 that are submitted.
That's crazy.
Yamahama. So this was an exclusive to cartoonbrew.com, and he had mentioned that in that not all of the short films have qualified. Actually, I think this was linked through from the Academy, but they had mentioned not all of the short films have qualified officially. They have to be presented in a certain length of time in a theater. They can't just be, web-based or anything like that. So they're submitted. Right now they're eligible because they still have a time frame. But like if they don't meet that time frame, then they'll be disqualified. It'll be less that they then eventually vote on. But it's still 85, and the 3 original SparkShorts. So we were wondering this when the SparkShorts came out, if they were going to submit them as entries.
That was one of my biggest, not concerns, but
questions.
Questions about the SparkShorts, because if Pixar's not doing like feature short films like that are released with the films. What happens with the short film category, for awards.
Right.
So I was really excited to see that all 3 were in the running.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Smash and Grab, Purl, and Kitbull, all of those are there. It'll be interesting to see next year if they throw that next group in there as well. So we shall see. But all right, so we have really gone through the news here. We're at like 50 minutes, something like that. So let's talk with our interview with Cynthia Slavens. Now, again, this is really interesting stuff. I hope you guys get a lot out of this. Please let us know either in the comments on the website or just send us an email, info@pixarpost.com. Hit us on any of our social media channels. We are interested to find out about your thoughts with this, the conversation with Cynthia Slavens, the director of studio mastering and operations. We talk about what her role entails, about the team that she's part of, upgrading a film from standard definition to high definition to ultra high definition to even testing some films in 8K.
Yeah.
And just other aspects. It's not just about the visuals, it's about the audio elements too, with upgrading a regular Dolby mix to a Dolby Atmos mix, or maybe you're adding in HDR or HDR10 plus to get more deeper blacks and whiter whites and more vivid colors. So there was actually a comment a couple years ago on our website that actually got this initial idea in my head and just never got around to asking, hey, who could we talk to? And then Cynthia was at a conference and with a couple other Pixarians and talked, and I saw like a video recap of it, and I was like, oh, I forgot to do that, ask for that interview. So we got that one, so that's pretty cool. So Yeah, so I think that you guys are really going to enjoy this. Please enjoy, and then we will circle back after the interview and touch on some of our additional thoughts. What we want to do when we dive in is obviously we want to find out, what an overview of your group is. Like I mentioned in our kind of pre-chat here that we already talked with Beth Sullivan a little bit.
Yep.
But, give us an average overview of some insights of what an average day looks like for you and, how many people are part of your team.
Yeah. So, as the Director of Studio Mastering and Operations for Pixar, there is no such thing really as an average day. Our work is very diverse, and we get to do a lot of different things, which is what makes it engaging and really exciting every day. Because we never know, what's going to be on fire on any given day or what opportunity is going to present itself. We serve two functions within the studio. On one side, we are heavily involved with the shows. Essentially, as soon as an editorial team is cast onto a show, we are effectively running alongside them the whole time, offering support by way of any video exports they might need. For example, we will create what are called work reels through the course of a production life cycle. Those will go to the audio team doing the sound mix, any of our composers, the marketing team at Disney. So we will, kind of take on the responsibility of generating those assets so that they can focus primarily on working on the business of making the movie and not have to deal with kind of all of those nuts and bolts and extraneous requests. We take some of that load off of them. We also partner with editorial on creating the in-progress versions of the movies. So everything like our digital cinema packages that are created, for example, for any of our Brain Trust screenings, which are the in-progress screenings that happen throughout the course of a film's life cycle, we will create those digital cinema packages, both for review here at Pixar and then externally with executive and creative teams at Disney. And so it's, I would say the best thing about the job and the thing that I talk about all the time is that there is a question that you will very commonly heard asked in the hallways of the studio of, oh, hey, what show are you on? We can confidently say all of them. And it makes our jobs really exciting. They're never boring for that reason. I think that is something that we share in common with our partners in marketing and in the PR team and other departments that kind of, have the great privilege and opportunity to work on all of the shows. And so we are working on kind of myriad content at any given time. For example, we've just put all of the finishing touches on the home deliverables for Toy Story 4 as of some number of weeks ago. Those are obviously being released out into the world now. Mm-hmm. We are gearing up to start the theatrical finishing work on Onward, which comes out, I think, worldwide next March.
Yep.
And I think worldwide because it's one of these that is releasing internationally everywhere right out of the gate, and that's new and different because usually it'll be like, okay, we'll have 30 some odd territories that release simultaneously with US, and then some number of territories will trickle off into the future. And no, this is everything all at once. So we're working on that. So we're working very closely with our partners in marketing right now on finishing all of the trailer assets for Onward as an example. So we've got lots of different stuff, lots of different moving parts, different pieces of content in support of each of the shows coming through the department at any given time. The other kind of role that we serve within the studio is we're kind of the gatekeepers and the keeper of the keys on the Pixar catalog. So if there is a request for a remaster or a new version of one of our films, those requests will generally filter to us, either by way of Jesse Schroeder, who's our the post-production producer here, or Jonathan Garson, who's our head of marketing, who, they will say, okay, Disney has an ask for this version of the feature. And because we were the last people to touch it, it usually makes the most sense for those requests to come to us, and then we will be the ones generating those assets for re-release.
Gosh, this is so fantastic hearing all the different details.
Yeah.
But you teed up perfectly into my next question, which was to talk about the remastering, because that's actually what got us thinking initially is seeing all of the in-home releases that are coming out with the new artwork of like the splash of the watercolor in the background that are in 4K for home release.
Yep.
So since, you kind of went that direction, let's go there and let's talk about jumping into a remaster. You said it makes sense for you guys to start looking at it, but how do you decide based on what's available, what's out there? How do you jump in and start tackling what you want to improve? Or I heard you say in other interviews, plus many times, and where to kind of pull back a little bit.
Yeah, I think that, to a certain extent, there is. So I should lead with, generally speaking, anytime we are remastering one of the films, it's because there is either the upcoming release of a sequel that sort of warrants the remaster of those. I think, we've talked quite a bit about the fact that Toy Story 4 afforded us this lovely opportunity to be able to revisit and remaster Toy Stories 1, 2, and 3 in the run-up to the release of Toy Story 4. The other motivating factor will be a new format in the, as you mentioned, UHD, HDR, Atmos for the home. As this has become, a direction that Disney has wanted to head in, they obviously start looking at their catalog across all business units to say, okay, what are the titles that we feel would be, good, content to have in the marketplace. So then they'll come to us and say, hey, we want your movies. And we say, thank you, that's amazing. We would love to do that for you. And then it becomes a little bit of a game of Tetris in that, say, for example, with the most recent UHD remasters that we've done of a significant portion of the catalog, that request initially came to us when we were just about to start theatrical finishing on Toy Story 4. And I sort of looked around at my team and we sat down and sort of held hands and said, okay, are we prepared to take this on in this moment under these circumstances? And I think that the thing that, if I'm talking about our department and our responsibilities, I think that if we're boiling down our job descriptions to their kind of simplest principles, it's to protect the movies. And, if we have the choice between being able to do the work ourselves, even if that's going to be a little painful, and farming it out to somebody else, we are always going to opt for the former. We're always going to opt to try to do it ourselves. So in the case of the most recent remasters, what we do is, the greatest benefit that we have in that context is that we, Pixar, are able to go back to the original source frames that live on our render farm in their nascent state. They come to us, as rendered, ungraded. So we are essentially starting with kind of what we refer to as the ground truth of that content. A lot of times, if a third-party vendor were going to attempt to do this work, what they might be starting from is a master that has a digital cinema color grade on it or an HD color grade on it. That doesn't mean it's not going to be great, but it doesn't necessarily afford it the opportunity to be as good as it can be. And so what we want to start with in any of these cases, whenever we can, is going back to kind of the earliest version of the source media saying, yes, we have versions of these frames on the farm that we can then up-res to 4K as needed. We can color grade for HDR starting, kind of from that completely basic place of, okay, this is the original version of the movie and nothing has been done to it that's going to pollute that content in any way, that's exciting for us. Because as I mentioned before, the other thing is that I would say 95% of the time, we were the last people to touch these assets anyway. My folks, so there are about 16 of us on my team. I would say, 75% of us have been at the studio and working in these roles or adjacent to these roles for at least 15 years or longer. So part of the benefit that we have is we have all of this institutional knowledge in our department as well. And so because oftentimes we will start going back through these assets. This came up quite a bit in a lot of the Atmos remasters that we did earlier this year, where we're looking at the sound archive and we're like, why on earth do we have a remaster of A Bug's Life from 2008? Who did that? oh, that was me. I did that. And now I have to remind myself, what did we do? What does Skywalker sound have? What do we need to, and just reminding ourselves, because that's the other lovely position that we are in as a studio is our content is evergreen. It is always in high demand. I'm knocking on every piece of wood that is adjacent to my desk right now. That is a gift because it's not like we are necessarily having to go back to a title that hasn't been touched in 20 years. 95% of the time, not only has that title been touched in fairly recent history, it's been touched by one of us. So we are the ones who can say authoritatively, this is where the bodies are buried on that title. This is why we did what we did. And then there are the funny little esoteric things that'll come up that you don't think about in the moment as being the tiny little snowball that starts rolling down the side of the mountain. But things like the Disney logo and the different things like the bespoke logos that we will do. For example, there was a 20th anniversary logo on the head of Cars when it came out. It made a ton of sense at the time. When you're remastering that movie for broadcast 6 or 7 years later, that makes no sense. And it's like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And it's, so we released the movie on Blu-ray shortly after its release, but it's no longer the 20th anniversary year. And so that's a conversation that needs to be had. So there's stuff like that you look at the original release of Toy Story. It has the old white Walt Disney Castle logo on a blue background where the line of Tinkerbell arches over, the gold flags are waving. That was an animated asset that was created here at Pixar. The guy that animated those flags still works here. And we're looking at that going, oh, God, we can't get to any better resolution version of that. And that's not the branding that Disney is using anymore. So there's a whole question of anytime we touch one of these movies, we have to think of all of the other things that are kind of hung on them to say, oh, my gosh, okay, we have to think about the logos. We want the logos to be uniform across the first 3 Toy Stories when we remaster them. Holy cats, they're not. So we have to kind of figure out, and then you make those types of picture updates, which begets an audio update, which begets, it's a whole kind of, you start, I'm now mixing my metaphors between the snowball rolling down the mountain and becoming an avalanche, but then you start pulling at the thread of that sweater, and suddenly you're like, oh, I have a pile of yarn and no sweater, and now we have to remake this sweater, and it's maybe not going to have the same sleeves that it had the last time, but it's still, the movie itself is going to be the movie that you remember, but there might be subtle differences in the other things that bookend the content or some of the choices that we made. So that's the kind of stuff where our institutional knowledge and collective memory, I think, saves us every day. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that.
No, it definitely, there's value in having employees that have been there for as long as like you said, as many of the department have been, for sure. So that got me thinking when you're talking about, Toy Story 4 offering the opportunity to do 1 through 3. Yep. So the thing that I think is going to resonate with our listeners on this that's really exciting is, so you're not just getting a pixel-stuffed upgrade of 4K if you go buy the new in-home release. You're getting all of those other instances of the snowball and the yarn that you're talking about that begot something else, that are going to be potentially lightly improved, but yet still feels like the original story. So it's not just a visual, real brief upgrade. There's a lot of information and details that people get in those in releases.
And there's a lot of care that goes into them. I think that's the other thing, as I mentioned previously, we all take this very seriously. And occasionally we may care a little more than is entirely necessary. But we have the good fortune of, a large number of the folks that worked on the original production of Toy Story still work here. We are working with the director of photography for lighting, Sharon Callahan, who's been here since the beginning. And when we're sitting in the grading suite with her and revisiting these movies, we want it, to look like the movie that everybody remembers, because we don't want to go so far in a different direction that suddenly we've disrupted, this beloved asset that people have, hung their childhoods on. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we give Sharon this lovely opportunity to be able to explore this different space. And I think that we found that quite a bit, particularly on Toy Story 2. The lovely thing about the older films is that there is content, and there are code values. There are, there's lighting information that lives in those frames that I don't think was intentional at the time. They were just trying to render and get a movie done, especially in the case of Toy Story 2. My God, it was a miracle that came out at all. And, so there's so much pressure. Well, here we have this lovely opportunity 20 years later to crack these assets open and say, oh, holy cats, look at all of that incredible dynamic range information that has lived in these frames the whole time. Nobody's ever been able to see it before because the technology didn't exist. So these are subtle differences. It's not like, we're not changing the color of Buzz Lightyear. We're not reinventing the wheel on the film or the characters, but there is so much lovely, rich detail information that, the opening sequence of Toy Story 2, if you look at that, if you compare the standard dynamic range to the high dynamic range, it is night and day difference as far as we're concerned. And that's the stuff that's really exciting. That's where it's like, oh, holy cats. And we'll look at Sharon and say, did you know that you were, she's like, no, this is amazing. And so it's such a gift to be able to go back, revisit these movies and plus them not only for the audience who's seeing them out in the world again, but also for the folks that have, been working on them a long time. And it allows us to, kind of revisit that magical process of creation all over again, which is pretty great.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And you had mentioned like the Pixar Archive. So do each remastered version, does it go into the Pixar Archive?
Yes.
Because that would be a lot.
And I'll tell you, I chuckle when I say that because our lovely folks on our systems teams, our systems team, our IT group, they would probably love it if we did not keep everything. But the minute, what we found over time is the minute that you don't create something or the minute that you decide to throw something away, that's when someone's going to come calling for it to say, hey, that version of Toy Story. And this is, we're in this kind of interesting, tricky place now of obviously our tape vault is going by the wayside. We are digitizing those assets as quickly as we can, but the format, the tape itself is disintegrating. The hardware isn't available to play it back. So it's not like we can just pull a tape from a shelf and say, oh, I can show you the version of Toy Story as it released on, VHS in 1990, whatever. Now, if somebody asks for that, we do want to be able to point to it on the archive and say, this is the cut of the film. This was the version of the film that released into the marketplace at that time. So we do keep all of it. I think there are people that would love it if we didn't. But, as I said, the minute that you don't, that's when somebody's going to come hunting for it.
Yeah. Wow. So what would be like the average turnaround time to do a typical remaster? And I say typical meaning like there's really not a typical.
But how about a full length of a feature film?
Yeah, like Toy Story 4.
Yeah. It depends. So for the most recent catalog remasters that we did, those were done very, very quickly because we had to, because that was kind of the time that we had available to us. I think that on average for those films, we're talking about, in that crop would have been Ratatouille and Brave and a handful of other titles. We probably took about 2.5 weeks on the picture remasters. I might have afforded a little more time for that process if we had it. But, you, in some cases, if you are going to be afforded the opportunity to do this work yourself, you just kind of have to figure out how to fit within the schedule. If we had to go back, obviously, the farther you get away from a film, the potential for something to break. We deal quite a bit with a concept that other folks might have talked about in the past known as bit rot, where you will crack open a frame and suddenly there is something that is fundamentally corrupt about it that was not previously. That, I'm knocking again on all the wood in my office. That doesn't happen to us a lot in the remastering process, but every so often something will come up where we're like, oh, crikey, this is actually going to take a little more time and attention to address. So in the case of, let's say, Toy Story 4, if we were having to dig back into it today because it's new, because it's fresh, if we had to re-render it, this is not a thing that's happening. I'm just using this as a hypothetical example. If we had to re-render it for 8K tomorrow, or if we had to up-res it to 8K tomorrow, that would be a significantly less painful process than it would be, say, for one of the older films. So it kind of depends on the vintage of the film that you're dealing with and how far you are away from its original release date. Because the newer films obviously are much more flexible and somewhat more robust in terms of the assets that we're starting from.
Yeah, I think, it just makes sense at a broad scale. The closer you are to the release, the more technology there is behind it. It makes me think of, like you talked about, a VHS tape, some of our home movies that are on VHS, or even that move to mini DV, or whatever the next media, and we have a collection of computers and old monitors that can hook up in case I ever want to go back and play it in that original source.
Yes,
while we have already upgraded and digitized them into Final Cut Pro and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So and I think that we get it.
I would say the most, and you guys may have bumped into this at some point, but it's one of my favorite studio anecdotes. A few years ago, when the theme parks team was working on all of the content related to Cars Land and specifically Radiator Springs Racers, Tony Apodaca, who's one of our longtime technical leads here at the studio, he had a 2006 vintage Linux machine living in his office for years because that was the way that you got all of that content back online again.
Yeah.
That was how you were able to dig back into it. And, it's not necessarily realistic to say, hey, systems department, can you keep all of these flavors of machine online so we can keep digging back into them? But if somebody raises their hand and says, hey, I need this one machine for this one purpose, they can generally accommodate that. But I would be willing to bet that there are a handful of those types of machines just peppered all around Pixar because you just never know what you're going to have to dig back into.
That's awesome. So the other thing we were thinking about, because you had touched on it earlier, and I'm glad that we're able to get to this too, is you said, what does Lucas have and those types of things. So obviously remastering is not about the visuals, and Pixar has had so many firsts between playing with the Dolby world, whether that be in audio or visual space. Yep. But talk about from a audio space, when you guys are looking to remaster something in Toy Story, something that's so far away, or whatever it might be, WALL-E, how do you approach that and say, we have more audio space now, what do we need to improve to reach that new potential?
Yeah. I mean, again, we are just lousy with good fortune around here. We have the great good fortune to partner very closely with Skywalker Sound, and a lot of the folks who have been working with us over the years are still on hand and available to us over there. Generally speaking, our rule of thumb, for lack of a better term, is we go to whatever gives us the widest spread. I mean, if we only have a 7.1, if we only have a 5.1EX, that's where we're going to start from. We're going to go back to that space and say, okay, what's the greatest number of channels that we have available to us for this movie? And we are very honest with ourselves about what might be creatively available in these spaces. A lot of the titles don't necessarily lend themselves to that, but, you mentioned WALL-E. I think that's a place where you look at the immersive qualities of all of the atmosphere of that film, and it might not necessarily be something that is character-based or sound effect-based even, but, that was one of the things we found with the Atmos remaster for Finding Nemo and for Finding Dory, is that suddenly you are in this space. I should say Finding Dory definitely originated in the theatrical Atmos space. Yeah. So that's another place where we have a great benefit of being able to start from those assets. But in the case of something like Finding Nemo, where you're like, oh no, I'm actually sitting underwater right now because of the just the creative potential that's lent by having all of that, either the overheads or the additional surrounds available to you. And that's a really lovely space to be in. And there are moments where we, in the course of remastering one of the films this year, we were like, wow, the music and effects are pretty hot next to the dialogue, and you kind of can't in certain scenes. It is a little challenging to really get to the meat of the dialogue and what the character is saying. And so, it just so happened that the person who was in charge of spearheading that mix when the film came out originally happened to be passing by in Skywalker, and we said, "Hey, could you come in here and give this a listen? We're thinking about bumping up the dialogue. Is that okay?" And this person was totally cool about it. He was like, "Yeah, absolutely. That's, because you play them back and you would make different choices based on the format and the resources that are available to you at the time. And It may have worked in that space however many years ago, but suddenly when you have it in this bigger space and you have all of, these other bells and whistles available to you, it's like, oh, no, that actually doesn't make a lot of sense." So being able to revisit the content and kind of tailor it on a title-by-title basis to the format that's a gift for sure.
My gosh, this is so cool. Love it.
He's geeking out. I think he could talk to you all night.
Love it.
No. I mean, but obviously I could literally talk about what we do for hours. It is such a gift. I mean, it's, we are... Honestly, I truly believe it the luckiest people on earth. I'm like, wow, we get to walk into this building every day, work with these people on this content. Like, oh,
yeah, it's ridiculous.
There are lottery winners that are, living vastly inferior lives. Like, it's just, it's such a gift. And, it's to be able to revisit these movies time and time again and remind ourselves of like, oh, right, this was the one that provided this challenge. And to have the opportunity to kind of have them live on in these new formats and in these new spaces, that's the stuff. Like, that's, you can just put the big rubber stamp of that's a career. Like, this, it's amazing. So I could talk about this all day.
Yes. And well, we appreciate your insights and your input. And like I said at the beginning of this, what kind of teed this whole thing off is us seeing all the batches of remasters that were coming.
Yeah.
And then obviously what's coming out as part of the Disney Plus launch that's coming. We still tell everybody, make sure to get your physical copies so that way not only you're getting the bonus features, but then you're also getting the highest, truest that you guys are intending for people to see, so that when it's played on your 4K player at home on your OLED TV, you are getting the right black levels and everything. So
that's amazing, and thank you for that advocacy. We do appreciate that, because that's the thing. It's like, we feel like we sort of ride the fine line, like, oh, we don't want to sound like we're just salespeople, like wandering around going, here, buy my movie. But at the same time, it's like, no, this is the thing. Like, that is the copy of the movie that will live in your home and will effectively live forever. And that's, that is the most pristine version of the film that will live in the world. So thank you for that.
Well, again, we really, truly appreciate the time, and what a blast.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we can't thank you enough.
Totally my pleasure.
All right, so that was the interview with Cynthia Slavens. What did I tell you? Wasn't that darn good?
Yes.
Okay, so
she's so kind.
Oh my gosh, I know. It was like literally talking to just such a...
like an old friend.
An old friend, gentle person, such a kind spirit.
And I mean, I feel like so many people, like everyone that we've talked to basically at Pixar has like been just so inviting and so warm.
Yeah. Everybody likes to talk about their craft.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, like, gosh, I guess when I was doing like accounting, bookkeeping stuff, I did not like talking about my job.
Well, because you weren't creating something.
Yeah, you're right.
This is creating. This is... your work didn't have an archives.
No.
Like these kind of things, like, I mean, I guess record keeping is archives, but you know what I mean? Like, there's no history here. There's nobody that's clamoring over this stuff. But I think that was I
would talk about that. Like, I'd be very enthused because I'm volunteering at our son's elementary school, and I'm really excited about it. So maybe...
But, I mentioned the archives because that's actually like, the part that I think you were really excited to learn the most about is like, keeping those versions. Yeah, just keeping like all the outdated versions now too. Like the ones that they keep remastering. I think that's interesting. The different introductions. Yes. How she said like, while we had the castle that was like a 25th anniversary or whatever. That's amazing that they're like, wait a second. We have to change that because it wouldn't make any sense. Yes. Yeah. So just really cool. It's just cool, fascinating stuff that you just don't think of, but it's someone's job to think of it. Well, I guess part of me also thought, ignorantly, I guess, that, you know, them putting the castle in at the front, like, part of me would be like, well, that would just be like a patch in later. It wouldn't be part of the actual film. But when they deliver it on film,
it's the whole...
in the old days, or now on digitally, it has to be the whole thing presented. They're not like there's not somebody in the booth like, go camera 1, go camera 2, go feed 4, you know, like,
yeah.
So it's really cool.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting too. And obviously, like I mentioned it going in there too, I just love that whole balance of keeping the integrity of the original film. Because anytime you're touching an original, it's like, ooh, what's going on here?
Right.
You know, like when they redid Jaws, you know, I know that was, you know, we had talked about that, and they did like a whole extra thing on the Blu-ray about how they scanned the original film, and then they went through on each frame and took out like the scratches that were on the physical film that weren't there. And it's like, you know, I'm glad we have both versions, because then you can see both. So that's one of the things that, you know, when we were telling her, like, you know, we tell people like, get these physical copies still, don't just do streaming, because things can change. I mean, scenes can come in and out. Look at what happened at the ending during the credits of Toy Story 2. There's edits that happened there, and now unless you own the physical copy, you don't have that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, like, not only could you go back and see these things in their original form again, but then you could compare it against the others. You know, maybe you prefer one over the other. Even the bonus features, this isn't related to this at all, but there's a version of the DVD of Monsters Incorporated that has just like the audio for the film, but not like it's the visuals, but not any of the dialogue. But they got rid of that on subsequent releases. Like, it doesn't exist anymore.
Interesting.
So it's like, okay, you could hear just without them speaking, you could hear just like the Foley work and all this other stuff. It's like super cool. But yeah, they don't carry the same thing through on each version. So I think that they're touching on some of these things with Atmos and other things like that, that it's good to have all of these versions. Now, obviously, you can't do that for every studio. You can't do it for every film, or else you're going to have a huge house with a ton of money that you've spent on all these things. But for us with Pixar, because of the quality and the passion that we have for these films, we find it highly worth it, and we hope you guys do too. So hopefully you took as much out of that interview with Cynthia as we did. It was fantastic and a lot of fun. So until our next chat with somebody else, I think that about wraps up this show. What do you think?
I think so.
All right. Well, that takes care of this episode of the Pixar Post podcast. Of course, be sure to follow us on all of our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, frankly. Lastly, if you like today's show, let us know. Rate us on Apple Podcasts, leave a comment on our site, or send us an email at info@pixarpost.com. Signing off as usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And be sure to stay tuned to pixarpost.com all week for the latest Pixar news. Bye-bye.